Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Scott Rutter. I am the president and founder of New Jersey Cannabis Business Association. Welcome, welcome. We're excited. We got Blakthumb with us today. Phenomenal background. Going to learn. All of us are going to learn something really important, really new. And I'm personally excited because not only with my NJCBA hat, but with my Township Green hat. So I'm excited to have this conversation. But before we get into it, I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank Financial Resources Federal Credit Union. Township Green, my gig, HBK CPAs, Burton Trent Public Affairs, Sprague Energy, our preferred energy provider, Dutchy, and Proteus 420. So thank you, our sponsors, for continuing to support the NJCBA. We got a lot of big things coming up, and just one note real quick. We have a battle coming up right now legislatively here in New Jersey. So your support, your participation is important. So thank you very much, our sponsors and our attendees. And Carrie and Brad, tell us about Blakthumb. Tell us what's going on. Tell us how you're going to save the world and save the industry. Make it better.
Thanks, Scott. Everybody, I'm Carrie, CEO of Blakthumb. Before we sort of reveal about how we're going to share our world conquer strategy, but no, we're not. We're essentially an ERP / seed to sale. I don't want to actually associate us with either of those because neither of those are doing the job they should be. So we call ourselves an operations platform. We track all of your operations, which are really important on the ground to then deliver all that data and all of those analytics you need to make validated steps and grow and scale, because we know you will. New Jersey is a great place. We were in Atlantic City recently, and that was super fun to get to know the local industry. One of the coolest things we also do is we integrate with your local compliance, and we're going to talk about that in a bit more detail today. I'm now going to hand it over to Brad because I'd love for him to share his background a bit.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Brad. I am the CMO of Blakthumb, and I'm kind of a little unique in this position in that, for whatever reason, I've worked for, against, or with just about every ERP software system in the industry. So like, I really have seen it all from a technology perspective, and I've worked so well within the supply chain, operating as the VP of marketing for so many of those companies in the tech space, that I've learned a lot about how operations succeed and how they don't. I've worked in multiple markets across the nation, so I've seen what has gone right and wrong in Colorado, California, Oregon, just really Michigan, so many other places out there, New York especially, what's been happening. And really what we want to do is be able to take like some of that institutional knowledge we've been able to generate and our understanding of the tech landscape and like help you not make some of the same mistakes that we see made everywhere else. So thanks for having us. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Me too.
Awesome. Should I share my screen? Is that okay?
Yeah, it'd be great, Carrie. Please do.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Awesome. Fantastic. So I think Brad summed it up really well. We want to share all of the mistakes, all of the opportunities we have seen in emerging markets and share them with you, because like a lot of them are being repeated multiple times and there's easy ways to avoid them. So essentially we want to share the known hurdles and the way to avoid them today. Cool. Would you like to kick this off, Brad? Because I'd love to kick it off, but I think you sum it up better. And I'll add my bit.
Sure. Yeah, and also we would like to openly invite you to ask questions as we go through this, right? Like, let's make this as much a dialogue as we can, because there's a lot of ways that this can go deep down a rabbit hole, right? I think more than anything, we want to like help you take like the pill that removes you from the matrix, right? And in this case, the matrix is regulated cannabis and the way that state officials set up cannabis markets. And the biggest hurdle we're seeing, just about every new state follows this exact same pattern and has not yet broken free of this pattern, which is relying on state officials to set up a thriving cannabis industry and letting their regulatory guidelines dictate how you operate. So if you think that your regulated officials have your best interest in mind, they don't. I doubt you all think that, but I think the good news is here that like you are the one who has your best interest in mind. So what we want to walk you through is like how to not just follow the guidance and the framework of the regulators and to actually think about how to be a thriving production facility, and then figure out how to just handle the compliance part as like a, you know, like sort of what happens on the back end.
You
So
have to do it. Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. And Brad, that was a great point. We see it all the time. Like you start a business and they give you this framework to follow and you end up setting up your operation to follow that framework. The biggest problem we're seeing when you rely on your state officials is like they don't know cannabis. You know more about cannabis than they do. So it's also a learning journey for them. So they're going to make all of those mistakes just like you in those first few years. So relying on them to know the industry well enough to set it up is usually the biggest problem.
Yeah.
Or one of the biggest problems. Lack of research. I don't know what leads to this, but we see it a lot. And it's coming from regulators as well. Like you're setting up a new industry, a new state, and it's almost like we've all got amnesia. The state next door has been open for the last 2 years. It might be great to go and knock on their door and ask, what were the biggest issues opening up your market? How can we avoid these? These conversations aren't actually happening. So you need to do the research yourself.
I think one of the things that was really interesting that we heard from Scott while we were getting ready to do this webinar was his experience at MJ Unpacked in New Jersey as a dispensary operator specifically, and how much he learned from the panelists on things to, you know, take away and implement within his dispensary operations. And I think that in and of itself was this tiny little example of exactly what we're talking about here. You can research endlessly online and everywhere else. You can read all the data. A lot of it is going to just be extra information that's not really going to help you really actually grow and thrive. But if you talk to other operators in different states, not just talking to operators in New Jersey, but talk to operators who have been in Colorado, California, or Massachusetts or whatever, who have a few years under their belt and can tell you some of these problems they've experienced, you know, perhaps they have actually built their operations on the house of cards that is following the state regulators' guidance and have since learned how that has damaged their ability to grow. And you can figure those things out ahead of time before you actually get fully up and running and have your operations totally solidified. Or if you need to pivot, you know where to pivot to, right? So like, don't just research online. Don't rely on the internet to really tell you how to run your business much at all. Talk to other business owners, not just in your state, but like across the nation. And like LinkedIn provides us access to all of these people in this really wonderful way. It's like this great water cooler for the industry. So like go huddle around the water cooler and reach out and have phone conversations or Zoom calls with these people, whoever was willing to give you time. Because I think that's the research that like most people miss out on. And they tend to follow the research of the data companies and, you know, the online publications, and they're not really getting.
Yep.
Oh, I think we lost Brad for a second
Did
there.
I was gonna say, did I freeze or did Brad freeze? Okay.
I think Brad is frozen, but I'll keep. Oh,
So,
are you back,
let
Brad?
me-
I think we lost you for a
I'm back, sorry.
Wait, Brad, that was an applause line. I think he was waiting for that long applause. I think that's why he was waiting. No, but Brad, I gotta tell you, dude, you're spot on. You know, and you know, we often joke about it, but it's very serious. You know, you know, when a government agency, a government entity, and legislators are coming up with a construct to create a private sector industry, and because it is cannabis, and because, you know, we're not talking about something brand new where we're selling new types of ice cream. That people are familiar with is cannabis. And so a lot of the adults in the room and the senators and the mayors and the chiefs of police are fearful of having this industry here. So we have all these dramatically onerous regulations on top of us. And I had a conversation with the CRC leadership, you know, not too long ago. And basically my message to them was, you know, that 400-page document that you got from everybody to kind of prove that we can operate, that you guys have to approve, it doesn't mean crap once you open up your door. I mean, it really doesn't. It's now it's up to the owner, it's up to the operator, it's up to the team. And you have to look at all these regulations and you have to, obviously you follow the rules, that's the objective, but you have to make those adjustments. You have to get smarter. And because the market gets incredibly, more competitive every day. There's a new cultivator starting, new dispensary operators starting, new products coming on the line. And so it's not 5 years ago where you open up your doors and you're selling $100 million worth of flour. You got lines around the quarter, and helicopters flying overhead. This is like, you're scrapping for your part of the market. So yeah, no, I completely agree with that.
Yeah, and it's a big problem actually. Like you see it a lot. People aren't getting the right advice in the early days. And so unfortunately we're seeing them make those mistakes constantly in their first year. And it's hard to watch. Like I find it hard to see.
It's,
Um
it's hard to experience too. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, exactly. I mean, once we get into someone's operation, it's almost like we're married and they want to give us their entire lives to operate. And so we get to see how people think about these problems and why it's impacted to the point, okay, they've jumped onto Blakthumb. And this is the lack of research they've done usually, and have taken either the easiest option or exactly what Brad said earlier, just read something online. We're the best ERP system in the industry. Our industry hasn't been around long enough for us to even have any great systems to prove out that it is the best system. So it's easy to find out anything before you make an investment on absolutely anything. I went and grabbed some stuff off Reddit, and literally people are sharing information about things. So if you need to make an investment tomorrow, let's say it's $6,000 or $15,000 on your operation, don't feel like you need to make that without any validation. That people love to complain. Like literally type it into the internet and people will give you the feedback and you can start having that conversation.
Right.
The one thing I love about the cannabis industry, people are willing to share. I mean,
Yeah,
yes,
they're not quiet. They're not quiet. And one of the things I also want to mention here is that like when you make the mistake of following the compliance guidelines as a method of your operations only, you fall into a trap that I've seen happen in every new emerging market, from the start of the regulated market, which is that you're new, you're trying to get everything started, and you want to probably do it at some sort of like a MVP level, like trying to keep things minimal, like expenses, complications, tool sets, yada yada. So a lot of people decide when they're starting to almost avoid using any tool sets or any systems to guide their operations and just manually operating on metric and like Google Sheets or spreadsheets, And when you do that, you are you're really setting up all of your operations to work the way metric or BioTrack or whatever tells you to, not setting up your operations to work the way that you can grow and work most productively and most efficiently. And eventually that breaks down. And what you do is you predicate your entire operations off of something that 1 or 2 years down the road has to scale and can't. And maybe you've got one person who's able to actually work on metric. What if that person churns? Where does that institutional knowledge go within your operations and how those systems are managed? So like really understanding that, compliance is just a checkbox we have to get. I'm not trying to downplay its importance because fines are real and we've seen that in New Jersey. But beyond just hitting that checkbox, as long as you're hitting the checkbox exactly as compliance requires you to, that's the end of its effectiveness, right? It does not dictate how you operate well. And so one of the things we want to really promote in this conversation is the idea that compliance is just a thing you have to do, but it is in no way closely related to how you need to operate.
I totally agree.
Yep.
Totally agree. I don't think I've said this enough. Every state we go into, we don't even actually compete with companies like BioTrack, where I see a full-on conflict of interest. You can't be regulating a state and then have a commercial system to go and help you operate, but there is. And from my perspective, you're constantly being sold this rhetoric that we're the only system that integrates with compliance, so we'll be the only system that can help you operate. The problem is the people they're selling this to are your mom and pop stores, the people that don't have endless cash or investment to back them up. So they're making this massive investment. They don't realize it's actually providing them with less clarity than they had before using hardware like, whiteboards and paper documents. So understanding where technology plays a part in your operation is a real key. And how is it actually making my life better? Because that's what technology is designed for, to make all the shit you hate doing easy. And if it's not doing that, then there's actually a problem with the product, not your operation. And so that's why we wanted to touch on that. If you're in a new industry, you feel obliged to use a compliance software, but there are other options, you should do the research and ask other people how they're using it and how they found it, especially as they've grown over those first few years. Do you agree, Brad? No, I
Yeah.
love your feedback.
Well, I
Yes,
mean, I
sir.
could tell you like a lot of the legacy systems that have been built to help you manage your operations were built because they knew using metric was a pain in the ass, and metric doesn't do a really good job training you how to use it well. So they were like, okay, how do we make this awful thing less painful? It's a very common thing for software engineers to think through. You have a problem and it's painful. Here's the solution I can provide you to make that less painful. The problem with thinking that way in this environment is that it's basically like, using compliance software is painful. We're going to make using compliance software less painful. Therefore, we've solved your problem. And actually, they haven't solved the problem because they misidentified the problem. The problem is not using compliance software is painful. The problem is operating under a heavily regulated environment is painful.
Yeah.
And how do you do that in a way that you can scale and actually grow and set real meaningful cogs up and set up a real meaningful financial operation and projections for what your next 5 years are going to look like when you're not just focused on compliance, right? Like that is really the big problem. So when we talk about software tool sets helping you grow, what we're specifically saying is it's not about trying to make things like reporting to metric or reporting to the state regulators easier. It's about how to make it easier for you to grow well and have a healthy company with a healthy balance sheet that can actually employ your employer or your workers and keep them growing, open up new locations, add to your license, expand your grow, whatever it might be. You can't do that very well if all you're thinking about is managing compliance. And that's a lot of the software ecosystem right now in cannabis, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, definitely. So like I've got a really good example. I won't drop a name. So like obviously I talk to a lot of big customers in this operation or in this industry. And there's a couple of massive MSOs. They set up following compliance software or following the wrong software. Now they manage hundreds of stores, retail stores nationwide. They're on spreadsheets because they can't manage their compliance, they can't manage their operation. They're such a mess that they've grown so quickly, they can't insert a framework. It's almost a nightmare to walk into to try and understand how can we reset this framework in this operation to work for us. So collaboration in this early stage is real key for you guys, especially if you've just started out. And exactly what Brad said, designing operations for growth, not compliance, is super key. Which leads us to hurdle 2. We see this all the time, balancing your prices with brand and value. Sorry, I'm just going to have a drink of water. Brad,
Yeah,
Brad's
I'll
a
run with it.
marketer. He sees this all the time, like a lot more than I do. I see it from an operational perspective, but he's seeing it from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, another of the biggest mistakes that new markets make that old markets have learned the painful lessons of is setting your pricing based on the going market rate and misidentifying what is happening in the current market that will not be happening in the future market. Really good example is Oregon, right? When Oregon first went rec, you would easily find pounds of cannabis selling for $1,500 to $3,500 wholesale. That is not a sustainable market rate for a pound of cannabis. That is a restricted market rate for a pound of cannabis. And the reason I say that is because Oregon grows some of the best cannabis in the world. They grow so much of it that the supply eventually diminished the value of everything on the market. And within a few years, a price of a pound of cannabis was on average $500, and a lot of them were going for like $100 to $300. Now imagine you set up your operations based on financials where you're making $1,500 a pound, right? As just a small example of how this gets all real FUBAR real quickly, right? what you need to be thinking about is not what is the going market rate right now, because as competition increases, you're going to get into a knife fight on this stuff and it's not going to hold. So whatever Curaleaf has been able to get for a retail eighth of cannabis, you know, over the course of the last 5 years is not what they're going to be able to get on a retail eighth of cannabis when you introduce hundreds of more licensees producing and selling more opportunities to consumers, if that happens, right? So like the more licenses that come to, the more supply hits the market, the you know, that supply can't leave the state, so you only have so much demand, and eventually that oversupply will bring your market down in what your going prices are. So if you set your prices up on something you can't control, and you misidentify that thing that you can't control as being your brand value and not just the early entrant kind of, you know, first mover advantage, you will be predicating yourself up on an absolute disaster later on. So
Yeah.
just know you're not getting $1,500 a pound as a cultivator on the wholesale market. You're not selling $60 to $100 eighths on the retail shelves for very long, right? Maybe not even for another year, right? Like that's going to happen very quickly. So that takes us to this,
No.
this hilarious slide.
To
Carrie
this
put together.
great slide. This slide is what pushed us to develop something in our product because of this dude, right? So we've experienced it ourselves. Like our product has been in those industries where in those markets where they've moved from medicinal to rec. And literally just within 1 year, I saw a legacy operator who was on our product, and it wasn't our product's fault, guys. I'm just going to say this out loud. That this is a waiver. They're on our product and they rested on their laurels. So they did no marketing whatsoever. They just knew they were the only ones that could do extraction. And in an early market, everyone went to them. They were super clever. Like they were great operators. They did everything great. And I know that because I can see it in the back end. They did everything great. They knew their margins, everything. They did no marketing. As soon as everyone caught up by the end of the year, no one knew what value they had. They didn't know who they were in the market anymore because the new guys came in. They knew their value. They knew what they were selling, and they knew exactly how to market to their customer. So don't be this dude. You need to know from day one exactly what that market's going to look like in a year, and how do we get through that? We need to build a brand, and before you do that, I need to know how much it costs to make product. Like if there's no point having a fantastic brand if you're not making any money. And to make money, you need to know your margins. And one of the key things, I'm going to share this with everyone. No one knows their bloody margins. No one knows the cost to make products. Every operation we go into, we sort of know the cost to make our vape brand, but we've sort of based everything off that. You can't do that because as soon as it gets flooded, you'll start to see people start selling vapes for some stupid price, and it's hard to compete. You need to know your margins. I mean, I'd love for you to touch on this, Scott and Brad, if you agree. But one of the key things we're seeing are these mistakes.
No, it is interesting just on the retail side. I mean, that's obviously more of my expertise, but it's interesting to, you know, getting feedback from customers, right? So some of it's solicited feedback, some of it's unsolicited feedback on social media. And you know, you enter a new market and immediately like, your prices are too high. Oh, I just couldn't go over to, you know, Curaleaf or some other place and get a better price, get a better deal. And then you look at the menus and we're like, okay, I'm $3 more on this one, I'm $2 less on that one. Like all of our price points are about the same across the board. It just depends on which discount you're offering on which product line, you know, that particular week, you know. So no one is selling, you know, rarely do you see like a $60 or $80 eighth anymore because it's almost always discounted. It's for sale for 60 or $80, but then it's 10% off or 15% off or whatever.
Right.
And I think that's where people are just trying to figure out like what is their rhythm to engaging with their customer base, finding the right products that people are excited about. You know, you do get complaints on the quality of a flower or a particular vape or something like that. And then there's new products coming online. You know, so it is just, you know, the consumers are well, just, and this is your show, I should go back, but the consumers are becoming more mature with their tastes and the flavors and their experience. Before it's like, I'll get any weed and I'll be happy. And now they're starting to learn, the different levels of terpenes and how that might impact the flavor, that type of thing. So yeah, absolutely.
I think there's a couple really interesting points you just made there, Scott. And I want to make one for retailers specifically, because I think like a lot of what we talk about with Blakthumb is very inner supply chain. It's not necessarily the customer experience with retail and how retail plays that game, right? But I also work with another tech company called Happy Cabbage that does focus on helping retailers promote. So I do know that environment pretty well too. And one thing I will give you as advice for anyone working in the retail space is to know that like consumers know better, right? So like the fact that everything is 60 to 80 bucks on the shelf at retail, but like there's always going to be a discount, like they are being set up in a game of chasing the best discount. What really comes into play here is how do you communicate your brand value, your customer experience, your retail knowledge, your ability to guide them, like all of the things they actually experience that generate real customer loyalty. How do you differentiate yourself from other retailers without just relying on discounts? I'm not saying
Amen.
go away from discounts, right? But like
Right.
tapping into that brand value and that story is the lesson for all of us, whether we're retail or not. Because if you are a cultivator, or if you are producing vapes or edibles or whatever, if the sole value of what you're providing is it has cannabis in it and you can go buy it, you're going to be chasing bottom of the barrel pricing because everyone else's pricing is going to drive you out of the market or down. However, if you are able to communicate that brand value and market it correctly and not rest on your laurels, right? Like right now I'm selling, so I don't need to worry too much about marketing my brand value or creating my story or educating my customers. Then they're not really going to know why you matter, right? You're just a product they can get for a price. And the next product that's available for a cheaper price that looks similar or does the same thing, they're going to pick it, right? But when you're choosing between wild or wana gummies, right, like there are very specific reasons why you might choose one or the other, whether it's by formulation or by ingredients, right? One's vegan, one's not, right? Like there could be all these different reasons you may choose. And if they don't know how to communicate those specificities to you, you don't know how to identify them as a consumer, and therefore you generate very little loyalty around the brand and its quality. So the thing that we need to really understand here is what goes into making our product and why is what goes into making our product special, right? If we're choosing to cultivate with live soil rather than salt, newts, and rock wool, okay, why? Right? Well, probably because we believe it creates more terpenes, higher potency, a cleaner environment, microbial health, right? It follows the nature of the earth and forest soil, whatever your reasoning might be. You have to figure out how to communicate that to consumers so they know why they would spend more on your product than somebody else. And when you look at markets like Oregon or California, which are busted as hell, you still find brands out there that are getting that 60 to 80 bucks for an eighth on the shelf. Even still to this day, THC Design in California will always fetch one of the highest prices of cannabis flower in the market there, because they have rooted themselves in their brand. And their brand, I mean, Jungle Boys is another example, although I know that that's kind of a problematic brand in some ways, but like people recognize that brand for what it is. And so they are willing to spend a premium on it, regardless of what the market rate is or what the discounts look like.
Why you have $100
This is
bottles of
perfect.
wine and $10 bottles of wine, right?
That's precisely right.
Exactly. And it's the knowledge you have around how that product was made. You're willing to pay more money on it. It's almost like you share your transparency, the transparency around your brand and what goes into it builds up that following. One of the coolest things we saw in one of the states that moved from medicinal to rec really quick was a customer who was really keen on individual dosing. That when they went from being a legacy brand to a recreational market, that they could hold their prices the same because it costs lots to individual dose to do that. They were so trusted because they did that. They shared their operational process. This, you can trust that this product's always going to be medically dosed at this way, and they shared the way that we build their recipes for them. They've not had to change their price because people believe that's exactly what we're going to get. This is my medical product. This is just a medical product. As an example, it's going to come to me consistently. And this is just one way operations can actually help build your brand on the front end. Well, I think it can. and it did it for them, and they did really well.
Yeah, and it makes sense because it's going to come down to quality control, and it's going to come down to your price points and your margins, just like any other business. And if you it like you said, if you're not properly prepared for the next phase, whatever that phase is going to turn into, it can really damage your reputation. And you start bringing out, if you start growing bad weed because your prices are compressed and you're laying off people, like you're scrambling to get the quality control because you didn't properly prepared.
Yeah.
One of the things, I'll shout out to one of our sponsors, Sprig Energy. Like if you're not properly prepared on your energy costs as a cultivator, when prices start going down and plummeting, and you didn't set up upfront energy efficiencies, or get the
Yep.
best deal on your, that's really shattering. I've talked to cultivators who have made that mistake, and they're trying to retrofit, and it costs a lot more money to retrofit than it does to start smart.
This house of cards implodes very quickly, and it's not only by predicating your operations off of compliance. It comes from many different angles, but like once you've started going down that path, if it's not holistically built from the ground up, like we're saying, like really understand what goes into the cost of making your product, build that from the ground up so you set your pricing accordingly. And you may still get market rate, but like if you can grow a pound of weed at $150, and you can make a 50% profit margin on a $300 pound, when you're getting $1,500 or $2,500 a pound, you're in the gravy boat. But you're built for $300 a pound. You're prepared for the future market, right? So that when it comes to $300 a pound, you're not like, oh crap, where do I cut, right? Like, how do I retrofit my energy? How do I make sure that my energy bill is not still hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, which I've seen with a Colorado cultivator, relatively small one.
Yeah.
Right. So that is a really important factor. And also, for what it's worth, I was talking about using marketing and branding positioning to fetch a premium price, but this is also true if you want to provide a very affordable product to people who do not care so much about super high premium products, right? Look at Dadgrass or Old Pal as really good examples of people who like openly sell mids, if you will. Some of them have rooted themselves around the idea of swag should come back, right? Like a lot of the old heads are like, this might be too potent for me, what's on the current market, and I just want to be able to smoke a few joints a day and still like not feel completely faced, right? Like that is a market segment that does exist, and there are people whom are not economically advantaged that still need access to the medicine. So understand how to get your cogs built from the ground up, so that if you want to be the value product, if you want to be able to like be always affordable to the most amount of people, that can be your brand position. But figure out how to make it. Don't make it like we grow the best weed in the world and it's not the best weed in the world and it's sold for really cheap, because then you just seem like a bunch of liars and con artists. But if you say we grow really good mid weed, right? Like we are the swag brand of today, right? We're for you who don't want super high potent weed. We hear you. Here you go. Here's a bag of shredded weed for you to roll on your own. Like there is a market segment for that, and you need to know how to communicate to that market segment so that you can position yourself appropriately. But again,
Absolutely.
You can't do that if you're predicating your sales off of what the current market rate is.
We bought a case of shake, right? So just to try it out, just to see, because we're 2 months old. My store, we're 2 months old, so we're learning our demographic. We're learning their buying patterns and all those things. We're in a very blue collar area, very diverse area. So we're not quite sure where the price points are with the quality control that they're looking for and their particular tastes. And one of the things we learned is that we are very, very flower heavy demographic, and price points matter. So the shake flew off the shelves, really did, but so did the higher quality one too. So we know that the customer base is looking for price points, within there, and that's a big, very important part of their purchasing. So if you can come in and get an eighth for like $25, that's going to fly off the shelf. But a higher quality eighth is selling for $60, $70 because it's the better brand. That's too. And again, the liquor store industry, if you really want to look at it, go look at liquor stores, man. The $200 bottle of scotch and the $35 bottle of scotch, well, the top end is not going to move as fast, but there's a market for it. So find that mid. That was a great point there, Brad. Find that mid price, find that maker's mark, if you will, or whatever, that's there, and it's going to get the job done, and make sure you're hitting the right price points.
I totally agree. I think the difference
Too many
between
liquor
someone
references for a cannabis conversation.
it's nearly impossible to avoid it, and I try to avoid it as much as I can. But like when you look at wine and craft beer, it's really hard to avoid that comparison because consumer behaviors are kind of the same. I mean, you know, people aren't using alcohol for medicinal reasons. So like taking that
Right.
one factor out of it, like for the recreational side, like a lot of people are looking for similar things in similar ways. It's not necessarily the same outcome, but like, you know, I may buy a high quality wine because I've learned the story of the grower. Maybe I've
Right
even
on.
toured their winery, right? I know about, or I've heard information from them about the quality of their soil and the climate and the area or whatever the region. So like I inherently believe Napa Valley Cabernets are going to be the best Cabernets in the US. They may not be. And someone can win me over and say, you know, actually, our Oregon Cabernet outperforms Napa, and here are all the reasons why. And then I might be like, okay, cool, I'll buy an Oregon Cab now. You've convinced me. You've told me a story I can believe in, right? So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think it's an unavoidable comparison for what it's worth.
And I love an Australian Shiraz. Right,
They
Carrie?
we do good Shiraz. We do great Shiraz down under. We do a good Sav Cab in the south of Australia too. I wanted to say this is all speaking to knowing the cost to make products, because you can't talk about how fabulous your brand is and it's you know, you can offer this and that unless you know how much it costs to make. And I wanted to give an example. We had an operator that jumped on our product because they wanted to scale. So this is an example of a larger customer. They wanted to go from they made them by hand, they filled them by hand with a machine, go from, I think, making 4,000 vapes a day to 20,000 in literally 2 months. And for them to be able to do that, they needed to track the data and understand where they were going to iterate to validate the decision to invest in these, you know, brand new machines that they invested in. We did it with them, but some of the things that they set up, and we realized once we went through this, are actual hangovers from when they first started, and they set their operation up based off how BioTrack collected the information and compliance. And so that was the one thing that stopped them to collect all the information and data they needed from day one to go, okay, this is how much it costs to make one vape cart. And so they put all of these controls in place to collect that data. It ended up costing them more money to do that than to just go, let's just find something to manage compliance, which is why we were harping on about it earlier, so we can hurry up and find out how much it costs to make product. So what we're saying is, if you're finding something a hurdle and it's not helping you tell your story or helping you find the detail so you can tell that story better and offer a better brand story, automate it, find something to manage it, because you don't have to deal with it. There are cost-effective solutions like Blakthumb, but definitely automate it. I'm not sure if you guys feel the same, but
Yeah.
in my mind, definitely. Cool. I was going to take everyone through a bit of what Blakthumb does, just high level, and then we were going to just jump off and answer any questions. We're not going to go through a great big demo. We believe in, if you want a demo, just contact us and we'll take you through in a bit more detail, talk about your needs and actually address those needs. I mean, trying to run a demo on a big forum like this is a little hard, but what we can talk about is why we developed Blakthumb and how we approached it. And a lot of what we talked about today is a result of of how people have set up their operations and some of the mistakes they've made because of the boundaries or limits that are sort of put on you as a cannabis operator. So essentially, when we started Blakthumb, we concentrated here at production control. For some background, Blakthumb actually started in the food place. We're actually working with NASA at the moment in Adelaide University to send plants to space next year in preparation for Mars. So we come from a very science background and a very operational background in terms of we'll prove out the data before we'll unleash a platform on you to use to make your life better. So we spent about 2 years creating this production control tool to pick up all the data you create on the ground. In terms of that delivered all the information we needed to know to make your job easier on the ground. So everything you have is on your mobile. If you're on the ground and you need to scan products, not enter it because you've got product all over your hands, you can do that. So a lot of the development of our platform was based on the way that you guys operate. How can we make those things simple for you? Once we created that, we then integrated inventory control and compliance. we realized as you start making stuff and growing stuff, you need to be able to comply with your local regulations, but you don't want to have to go into that platform and manage that at the same time. We realized, we did some research, it takes 25% longer to do the same job within that compliance software than it does to actually physically do that job. So if you can remove that time-consuming process, remove it and automate it. And the last thing we realized was your sales dudes play a big part in your organization. I know it does drive a lot of people, especially production people, a little mental, having to deal with their sales team. I like the sales guys, but they just need a bit of structure, eh? So what we did is we created a whole lot of structure for your sales team to be able to drop those orders into production. So your production team can actually calculate and understand what's coming up, cash flow, what should we preempting in terms of making and growing like the next season or the next production plan. So essentially Blakthumb was created based on your problems and how we can solve for them to make your operational life easier. And we package that all up into one program and manage your compliance all the way through from the day you plant that seed or a sale lands in to the day that your consumer sees that product. Essentially, that is the back end of our product. I would love it if you've got any questions, or Brad or Scott, that you think people would want to know more about the platform without me going into too much detail.
Well, yeah, actually, I want to expand a little bit on this because I think the important differentiation point actually holds a lot of good advice and guidance for how you think about your operations, right? So there's two approaches to how we could create a tool set that helps you. The first approach is, what are the things you are doing that suck, and how can we make them not suck, right? And so we build a bunch of little things that automate or make it easier for you to do a thing, a task, if you will, or a process. And then you've got a software system to manage those processes. But what if those processes don't actually align to your goals as a company and your growth goals, and how you're actually trying to, like, what your vision is for your company's growth? The other approach, which is the approach we've taken, is to not say, what are the single tasks that are painful and how can we make them not painful, but rather, why are you doing those tasks specifically, and how do they help align to and help you achieve your goals as a company? So if you can think about what are we actually trying to do, and reverse engineer how to achieve those goals in the most efficient and productive manner, you can create solutions that actually solve the real problem, not the symptom, right? Like, we can get to the source of the disease, if you will. And what we've realized, and this comes from Carrie and Mel, the co-founders, this comes from their experience as operators, is that cultivators and manufacturers are not data entry specialists. And when we have any single task automated, or if we are aligning our production facilities to how to manage compliance, what we have turned all of our cultivators and all of our extraction scientists into are data entry specialists, because that 25% of extra time that Carrie cited, that's all time spent just entering data into a system so that the data gets where it needs to go. Like, that's what the system's supposed to do, right? We're supposed to be able to find out the easiest ways to collect that, so you don't have to tell us what it is, and you don't have to tell Metric what it is. Like, we can handle all that for you. The real question is, how do you actually achieve your production goals? Are you trying to release X amount of SKUs by X amount of time frame? Like, okay, how do we back out of that goal and help you achieve that goal the most effectively? And then, here are the ways that we'll report to compliance along that pathway, but we're not thinking about, here's the thing you're doing and it sucks, and we're going to fix that thing, which cascades into a giant tangled ball of yarn of things. Instead, we're like, what are your goals, and how do we help you achieve those goals? And then we'll build the system to map your production facility around that. That is the fundamental difference, I think, that exists between compliance-oriented thinking and production operations-oriented thinking. And it's also the reason why I think Carrie feels reticent to call us an ERP or a seed to sale system, because we're not doing all of those things that everybody else is doing in that regard. We are actually thinking about operations and how do we create an operational system for you in your facility, and then use the software to manage that. That's the most important aspect of this, is understanding your goals and how to meet them.
Yeah, I got to tell you, so again, being a new operator myself, inventory management's critical. Sometimes you're getting products that are going to have an expiration date. within a matter of a month or so. So is that
Yeah.
a product that's going to move fast enough so that you're doing it? And I think, trying to figure out how, on the cultivator manufacturing side, so that you're not in a position where you're selling these products that are going to expire soon, that you are in a position that you have predictability. And so that's what you're suggesting here, that you can help these guys with their predictability on what the market's going to
Yeah.
bear, and so
Yeah.
that don't flood it accidentally and all of a sudden we have expiring products.
Yep.
Yeah, massively. And the tools we've put in place just it helps that predictability. So one of the things we did last year was, inventory. It's insanely mad. Like you're constantly managing things moving like this.
Right on.
And one of the things I saw was someone walking around writing down all the IDs, because then only some of our stuff is still compliant and some of the other stuff hasn't been synced yet. So not everything can go out the door yet, right? So you've got
Right.
all of these things moving like this inside inventory. We just made it easy. We pulled all the labels into inventory, created bill of material labels so you could put up on all your racking systems, and now you can track everything from one mobile. So instead of like crazy things, what's going out, you just scan your QR code and it will give you a breakdown of what's going out that day, what's available, and what's in production. Just that one simple tool helps you predict how much we need to put in production tomorrow without me going into the system. And so being able to be in those environments, being able to see you operate really helps us. We still iterate the product to help you work better and faster. Yeah.
Another really good example is like I really like couching this example in edibles manufacturers, because I think edibles companies deal with this really specific environment of cannabis and non-cannabis inventory, right? So you have to have your gelatin, your sugars, your flavorings, your dyes, whatever is going into your actual gummy formulation, and then you have to have your distillate or your live rosin or whatever is the actual extract you're using to infuse it. And those two things live in two different worlds from a compliance standpoint. So when you build your operations based on a compliance framework, you will think, how do I report to metric on the batches I'm using that are involved in a given production run of, say, 1,000 gummies? And what that does is allows you to report to compliance, to metric or whatever when you're making them, but it forces your gummy production person, your chef or whoever that might be, to have to do insane amounts of calculus to understand how to manage the inventory that they're putting into those 1,000 gummies. And a really quick understanding of that, so that I think this just makes the word parametric recipes make sense to me, because I think that word's very academic, and I doubt many of you relate to what that means. But what it means is you've got 1,000 gummies you want to produce. You know how much sugar, how much gelatin, how much ingredients that are non-cannabis need to go into that, and the system will check your inventory on those non-cannabis items and say you've got either enough or you need more of any of these given ingredients to meet your production need. So, okay, cool. You've got all of your inventory sort of aligned. You've got everything you need in stock to make 1,000 gummies. But your distillate, say, you've got maybe half a kilo of distillate and another 3/4 of distillate that are two different percentage levels. One's maybe 80%, the other is 88%, right? So the volumes of each of those distillates you have to pull from to hit your 1,000 gummy mark at a 10 milligram per gummy mark, for instance, might have to come out of both of those containers of distillate. You might not have enough of one and you need to tap into another. How do you figure out the volumes of each to hit your production needs? You have to do crazy calculus. You have to, divide out volume by potency. Sorry, go ahead, Carrie.
And then I was going to say, and Brad, and then throw into the mix, because every boss loves to do this. Hey, just got an order. Just can you throw in another 10,000 into that mix?
Right.
And then watch their brains move, right? And you're going, holy shit.
So when I said earlier, like you're turning your people into data entry specialists, you're turning your gummy production person into a calculus master, essentially, to be able to calculate what exactly needs to happen and what exactly needs to be in inventory to meet demand, to meet sales orders, to meet production runs. So if you don't have to do any of that, if the system can solve that for you, you can just focus on making the best possible gummies, right? Like you're not there doing all this math on either calculators or spreadsheets or, God forbid, notebooks, which is all the case that we see everywhere across the board, right? And that's exactly like us going into and saying, okay, what are you trying to do and how are you actually accomplishing it? And what is the goal you're trying to hit? So we can help you hit that goal. And it's not by having you do a bunch of calculus. That's not going to help you hit the goal. That's just managing your compliance needs. And what it leaves you with is a problem that you now have to solve that takes resources and time and energy and a skill set that frankly, like cultivators and production manufacturers should not have to worry about, right? Like calculus is a great skill for all of us to have, I'm sure, but like I'm not a calculus wizard. Nobody should ever expect me to be a calculus wizard, right? So if I'm on a production line and I'm having to figure out how much of each distillate to take, like it's going to take me a long time to solve that problem unless something can just do it for me. And then it's not even something I have to think about.
True. That's so true. I'm just going to touch on what Brad said there. I've seen it multiple times. Massive containers. I go into a place and they're just unfinished product being made. Like you don't have to go down that pathway like at all. There are tools out there. I'm not just going to say Blakethumb's the only tool, but there are tools out there that can make your
But
life
it's the
easier.
best. I mean, you could say that.
Just come give us.
We're biased, but you know, at the very least, take my word for it because I've seen it all and I've seen it from the inside. Like I do actually think they're the best, but
Yeah, and we use our own products. So that's another thing. Ask your teams, your tech teams, do they actually use their tech product? So I make my team use the tech product. And that's usually a good signal. If they can't use their own product, how do they expect their customers to use it? And it's a great way to find out problems. Well, we're gonna sort of just close it up here. We'd love if anyone's got any questions or would love to reach out to us. You can contact us any way. Scott's got all our details. Otherwise, go to our website and yeah, reach out. We'd love to catch up. What do you think, Brad? Is there anything you'd want to end on or share with the industry?
just realized I muted myself because my kid is crying in the background. If there's anybody that you want connections to, reach out to us and see if we have them. We're happy. Or if you're just saying,
Yes.
you know, if you're just like, I would love to be connected to other operators in other states, what's happening in New Mexico, what's happening in Colorado, like we're happy to facilitate introductions so that you can do that research that we're, you know, advocating you do. I think like our entire industry really thrives on connectivity and networking and community.
Yep.
And when we're doing it right, we are staying connected to everybody in this industry together. It is a nationwide industry. It has all these big billion-dollar numbers attached to it and all these like tens of thousands of jobs attached to it. But it's really I mean, I think Kate Crowder said at the end of the day perfectly. It's a petri dish sized industry still. I know almost, or at least can get access to almost anybody in this industry. And I'm just a marketer, right? Like there's no reason I should have that easy access except for the fact that our industry is still so small and tight knit and loves to collaborate, right? So some people are going to be caged. They're not going to tell you much. They're not going to want to collaborate. They're also not going to respond to your email when you try to make an introduction to them. So like you can like, forgetting them, there are a lot of people here who want to help you and who want to give you really good advice and help you avoid the pitfalls of what they've gone through. And because the state cannabis markets are set up to be insulated, talking to operators in other states is not really that competitive, right? They're not going to be afraid to share secrets with you because they're operating in Oregon. They're not operating in New Jersey and may never, right? Although I know that there are quite a few licensees in New Jersey that have come from Oregon. So yeah. You know, shout out Grass Company. I love you guys. But
well,
yeah.
You know, there's a lot of entrepreneurs from New Jersey who went out to Oregon, you know,
right.
Went out to California. Now they're finding their way back.
Actually,
find their way back.
yeah, you're right. Actually, I met a couple in Atlantic City, and I was like, he was like, "Oh yeah, I did all my research. I'm back. I know exactly what I'm going to do."
Grass Company did it. Lobo Canagars, you know, like there's quite a few really good examples of brands that did that and are now bringing them back home, right? They went and they achieved institutional knowledge in like a multi-generational industry, which is Oregon and California. And now they're bringing that back to like really enrich the New Jersey environment. So like there's so much knowledge to gather from other people. We want to help you connect to those people as much as possible and be a resource if we can. So please reach out and let us know.
Great.
So speaking of which, Steve Montano asked a quick question. So if you could just provide your email addresses live right now, and then of course Jenna will send everything out afterwards. But while you're here.
Yep, I just dropped mine in the chat.
All right, Steve.
Awesome, so did I.
All right. Well, look, this has been going on for almost a full hour. I got to tell you, I didn't even feel it. This has been a great conversation. Really, for me, it's been, a wonderful conversation because again, I now have this more personal experience than just being the president of the NJCBA. I'm in the trenches, and dispensaries are the tip of the spear. We're at that point where we're engaging with the customer, and we give that feedback to to our cultivators and manufacturers that we're buying from, because we want to get the best product and not one size fits all. When you go buy a bag of weed on the street, you have no idea what you're getting, and now you do. So we're getting educated consumers, and they're getting really picky now, because they know what they want. If you don't have it, they'll go someplace else. So
Yeah.
great conversation. I do want to do a couple things here, clean up administratively. I do want to again thank our sponsors: Financial Resources Federal Credit Union, Township Green, HBK CPAs, Burton Trent Public Affairs, Sprague Energy, NJCBA's preferred energy provider, Dutchy, and Proteus 420. I will never get that correctly out the first
I think
time.
it's Proteus.
Proteus. I want to say Prometheus. I want to say the movie.
Yeah, right.
Like, every time I look at that, it's like, oh, it's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah. Great film.
But anyhow, and then also, Jenna, if you could throw up the flyer, we have an event coming up on June 25th at one of our favorite places, Johnny Mac's in Asbury Park. I do encourage people to go there because we have everybody in the industry represented there: cultivators, manufacturers, dispensary operators, attorneys, engineers, whatever. We have them all, and we have a great time while we're networking. And we'll be giving you guys, we'll also be providing legislative updates. So for those who are paying attention to what's going on legislatively, there's an effort right now to pass legislation that would ban Delta 8 related products being sold in grocery stores and gas stations, and go through a regulated process. But then there's some interest from the alcohol industry to convince the legislature. So while you're doing that, please allow us to sell cannabis beverages, which we do not support. But that is what's going on. So a little bit of background there. And we'll be sharing more of that as we go forward. Carrie, loved having this conversation with you. Brad, this has been terrific. I know, a couple of comments here, people really did enjoy this, a lot of information. And I hope you guys great success. I really appreciate your comments about making sure you research the industry, and that you guys are going to be able to help people with connections too. So that's really terrific. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
All right,
guys.
guys. Thank you.